All right. Hey everyone, how you doing? Just to get a sense for who uses the greenways here and how, who in this room bikes on greenways in the 5 boroughs? Show of hands. How many people go out for walks on the greenways? Go out for a run or a jog? Bring out, meet friends and family? All right. Fantastic. So, we're going to talk today about the state of greenways today in New York City. And while the greenway work in the city, it's done by multiple agencies across all levels of government, the bulk of that work is done by 3 city agencies. The New York City Department of Transportation, New York City Parks Department, and the Economic Development Corporation. So these 3 city agencies, they all have a role in the upcoming citywide greenway plan. They all have a role in the early action corridors that a lot of us have heard about being funded with federal planning funds. But each individual entity has been working on their own projects that's been moving forward the greenway system along. So these are the folks here that I'm about to introduce. They're going to be representing their agencies, and they're going to be representing teams that have essentially dedicated their civil service careers to the advancement of greenways and biking infrastructure and open streets. We have Lena Ferguson from the Economic Development Corp. We have Mitchel Loring from New York City Parks, and we have Ted Wright from the Department of Transportation. Someone want to run the clicker?
You know what? I'm going to stand up, if that's okay.
Sure.
Thank you guys, first of all, for hosting this. Really good coffee back there. I really enjoyed it. And really, I know it takes a lot, and we need the momentum, and we need to be here today, all of us and our teams. A lot of the teams that I work with every day are here. We need to hear what your concerns are, and we need to, a lot of this stuff is glitz. We're going to show you guys what we're doing right now, and that's exciting. It's very exciting. But we also need to get the direction from the public, which is also really key. So I love these things, and I'm going to hopefully open it up to questions. We'll be around today and tomorrow. Introductions, we already did this, but I'm Ted Wright. I run the bicycle program and have been involved in greenways for years. NYC Parks is represented by...
Hi, everybody. Mitchel Loring. I'm a project administrator in the Environment and Planning Division at Parks.
And Lena Ferguson, Assistant Vice President at EDC in our Neighborhood Strategies Department.
This is the first big thing that I have to present today. It's not done, but the last time we had this summit, we talked about the citywide greenway study. And there was a lot of numbers being thrown around. I think it was 400 miles at the time of greenways. And what we're looking at now and what you're seeing is us basically organizing all of these segments that exist already in some shape or form and have put them into a database, and this is it graphically represented. This may not seem like a lot to a lot of people, and it might not be at this point, but this is the background from which now New York City DOT is going to be presenting a gap study. We're going to be looking at all those major gaps over the future, and that's what's going to be exciting. But this stuff, to me, as a planner, this is really exciting. All of a sudden, you start to see that Parks has a lot of land out there. A lot of those are, over time, developed in Shorefront Parkway would be an example of one that some people don't even realize is Parks. DOT has a lot of on-street stuff that we call greenways. Then there's some various other folks. Not going to go into it too much, but another really key thing that we've been able to do is come up with a naming system here for greenways. That's really key. If anybody's been using these things, like the question that Brian was just asking, you've been out there, you've seen signs. I've seen some crazy signs, and they are legacy signs from years. So now what we're starting to do, all right, let's pull this together. Let's call it a greenway system, and let's begin to build off of that. So this is a great platform that we will be sharing a lot more of. Ultimately, we're going to be putting it online for all of you to see and for policymakers who are going to talk next to use, but it's very exciting. Some of the big things, high level, We have $7.25 million, an unprecedented amount of money to look at planning studies. We are going to be focusing on underserved communities. We're going to be talking about that, and you'll see some of DOT's work specifically, and then the other groups will talk about theirs as well. Another thing that's exciting that's coming up is we're working, and this is going to take some time, not going to lie, but if we're talking about electric helicopters, I'm going to talk about the citywide cyclist micromobility model, which is really exciting because all of a sudden we're going to be able to look at routes and see how many people are going to be using these routes in the future if we build them. That's like, let me say this, Greenway is one thing, bike routes are completely different, and we have to start modeling these things not based on cars that we've been doing for years and years, but actually doing it from a bicycle standpoint. Taking too much time. Moving on, this is something that EDC is doing. This is actually very, very helpful to the process. They're going to be looking at feasibility studies and looking at what things can be built out best and what kind of money and what kind of resources do we need to commit to certain projects. So that's really key. We're going to be going through a bunch of things that Lena will talk about, but I think that that's like, it complements what you're hearing from me is we're like creating a base level data information. Then we're working at these plans. And now the next level is going to be, how do we spend the money? How do we dedicate the resources? Part of that is where are people going to ride, but there's a whole host of other things. Kind of exactly what you guys were just talking about, what Andrew was just talking about all these investments in the city. How are we going to spend these on greenways and make the biggest difference in the communities around them? Now, our implementation plan, something I'm really proud of. Margot is here somewhere. She's been working hard on this. Also, Emma and Tim are valuable members of my team that are out here working with communities and trying to get maps on the ground and actually defining new routes. These are the routes that we talked about. We've already started the Bronx Harlem River Greenway. That one we're going to be talking about. We're going to have an actual route that we're going to start pouring money into and building more investment. We're also doing some stuff right now on that. Queens Waterfront Greenway, Emma and Tim are running that. Emma could raise her hand for a sec. Really, really exciting. Biketober is around the bend, people, so get pumped. All right, historic Brooklyn Greenway is also coming. That's the first Parks-led one, but that's also going to be coming out in the next round. So it's going to take time. Can't be built every day, but it's very exciting to talk about. With that, I'll pass it over to my colleague.
Thanks, Ted. So all that planning work that Ted was just talking about might sound like we're doing a lot of planning and not a lot of building, but I do want to remind everybody that, of course, these greenway projects require a substantial amount of coordination because they're long, linear nature. They're obviously crossing multiple different political, agency jurisdictions, as well as physical obstacles along the way. It's no small task to alter a dozen or so miles across neighborhoods in one of the most densely developed cities in the world. But New York City is on a bit of a roll right now, having some success going from planning, funding allocation, designing, to building projects. Just 2 years ago at this summit, the first one, Parks had recently completed our Destination Greenways plans for Brooklyn and Queens. At the summit, we had just recently released the plans. The Adams administration decided to come right out the gate and fund 6 of those initial projects to jumpstart this process, which was great news at the time. Since then, 4 more additional projects from this planning studies have been funded, which is great and really shows that these thorough planning processes can help make the case for these big transformational infrastructure investments in our neighborhoods. So thus far, the Adams administration and the City Council have already allocated over $70 million to the projects from these plans and Destination Greenways for Brooklyn and Queens. Parks and DOT are now hard at work trying to make these plans become a reality with that money. But while the infrastructure investments that were coming out of these implementation plans are impressive, it's also really exciting that the agencies are able to quickly implement some improvements through some in-house resources. DOT's Street Improvement Projects program is one of these options. The example shown here is on Utopia Parkway in Queens. The top photo there on the right-hand side of the slide is the current routing of the Greenway, which is along the sidewalk. In the Destination Greenways plan for Queens, we identified this short little connection, which makes the connection between two different portions of Casino Corridor Park as a priority to upgrade, but not necessarily needing a full-fledged capital project. Because we highlighted this in the plan, DOT has been able to move forward with creating a new design for an on-street bidirectional bike lane on this corridor to make this connection between the other segments of the Greenway safer and more legible. And what I've heard from DOT is that they're hoping to implement this project before the end of the year. So we're moving fast on these things, faster than a typical capital project. Soon we'll all be able to go ride safer on this little section.
And people will see the Greenway out there. Yeah, all those people driving by, all of a sudden they're going to make that connection.
Yeah, thanks, Ted. And then some of our implementation plans are yielding results even before they're complete. When Parks needed to close Rainey Park for a reconstruction project that would temporarily close the portion of the Greenway on the Queens waterfront route that is in the park, DOT saw this opportunity to fill in a gap in the Vernon Boulevard bike lanes that we've known has been there and we knew would be a key missing link in the Queens Waterfront Greenway plan coming up. So once the park reconstruction project is done, hopefully next month, with these new added on-street bike lanes, we'll now have a great parallel route condition where we'll have an in-park greenway right next to an on-street greenway, which is a really big improvement for some of these corridors and helps us accommodate the many different types of diverse greenway users we have, whether you're out for a recreational outing, pushing a stroller, on a jog, or seriously commuting to work using the on-street greenways. These parallel routes are great for that, also provide redundancy in the case of future temporary street closures or park closures. So the city team will be looking for other opportunities to find these quick win street improvement project processes all throughout the geographies we'll be studying in the implementation plans that Ted was talking about. That way we can keep making some steady incremental progress sooner than the full capital project process takes and keep building out the network that we all want to see in the city. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Lena to talk about some of the progress we've been making in Manhattan.
Thanks, Mitchell. I don't have a beautiful flyover of the New York City Harbor to share, but I do have the pleasure of talking about the Manhattan Waterfront Greenway, which I think is just as good. As I'm sure most of you know well, the vision for Manhattan Waterfront Greenway has a decades-long history of advocacy, including by, I'm sure, plenty of you in this room, and of planning. It was first mentioned in 1993, followed up in the Bloomberg administration in 2004, and now we're doing the thing. To date, 85% of the loop is complete. We're working together, our three agencies, to close that remaining 15%. In 2018, we jointly released a plan for those remaining gaps, which is the map you see here. Throughout the years for Manhattan Waterfront Greenway, we've done a lot of community engagement, used SIPs like the ones Mitchell mentioned to build momentum, and have built and are building capital projects as funding becomes available and as the time becomes right. I'm going to highlight 4 of those exciting capital projects along the east side, projects that EDC leads design and construction for on behalf of the city, and of course working in close collaboration with these fine folks here. So first, East Midtown. You all know the East Midtown Greenway segment from 53rd to 61st, which just opened in December. As you also know well, no waterfront land in this location because of the FDR's location. So to achieve a waterfront greenway, we built the 0.3-mile project outboard in the water. It has separated bike and pedestrian paths, each about 20 feet wide, the planting area, pedestrian bridge over the FDR, and public art to raise awareness about ecology of the East River. Immediately south, as Andrew mentioned, we're currently designing the UN Esplanade portion, which will be double the length of this one. It will connect directly to the end of the East Midtown Greenway at 54th Street and extend that outboard greenway all the way to 41st, where it will link up directly with New Wave Pier. We're expecting construction of that project to start in 2026. And then I'll move upriver to a couple of our projects that are in exciting stages in Harlem. Those are first, Manhattan Greenway Harlem River. This is actually a 7-acre waterfront park that includes a 0.7-mile greenway connection built on previously underutilized waterfront land between 125th and 132nd Streets. In addition to the greenway, the park's also going to include adult fitness areas, multiple lawns, overlooks, seating areas, public artwork, a playground, a grilling area. It's really going to be an amazing multi-use asset for this community that we're anticipating breaking ground on and beginning construction later this year. Alongside projects to fill remaining gaps, the last project I want to mention is one that we're doing to improve existing portions of the Manhattan Waterfront Greenway. We're currently designing the reconstruction of a section about over a mile that Andrew mentioned called Bobby Wagner Walk from the 90s to the 120s, and reconstructing the 107th Street Pier. A lot of this area, the pier itself, is currently closed because of condition. A lot of the area is inaccessible. We're really excited to reopen it for the community. The reconstruction includes raising the greenway to account for sea level rise, incorporating seating areas, overlooks, adult fitness areas again, child play areas, picnic tables, shade, public art, you know, everything that'll make this a great space. And we anticipate construction to start next year on this one. To wrap us up, I'll pass it back to you, Ted, to talk about the process of building new routes from the start.
Thank you, Lena. I'm going to go take the podium. So now I think it's kind of apt to, you look at kind of a lot of the people I know from back in the day when we were advocating for the Manhattan Waterfront Greenway, and specifically the portions out in the UN. That takes time, you know, and it's about gauging time. It's about how do you keep interest over time. And that's really where I think all of us are definitely on the same page here. We all approach it differently. Lena just talked about, you know, coming to fruition, these huge, massive projects that cost a ton of money, a lot of permitting. And then Mitchel's talking about all these parks that like are hard to change. There's different issues with parks. But one of the things that I feel like we've been doing a lot, and coming back to where we are right now, is developing new planning networks. So instead of looking at these as all little pieces, what we're looking at is larger pieces. How can we connect all these segments? How do they go from just one small project to a larger connection that connects more people, that's more useful? We're talking about, there's a walking advocate shirt that I'm assuming what City Saunter is. And like, I literally am thinking about, like, I'm very much on the bike side, but there's a lot of people out there that just want to walk along their waterfront. And that's an advocacy aspect that we need to capture. And I think that that's one thing that we're all working together. So enough spouting here, and I'll talk about one of the things that you're seeing in the Bronx River, Bronx Harlem River Greenway. Harlem River Greenway. That thing always throws me off. Everybody else wants to put Bronx in front of it. I want to call it the Harlem River Greenway, which is on the Bronx side.
That's why this naming is so important.
It's so important. It's so important. And I don't believe we put Bronx in front of the Harlem River Greenway, right?
No, because
No.
Manhattan Waterfront Greenway is Manhattan Waterfront Greenway.
Thank you. Listen, like this, you guys think,
Now we
you guys can
that and make it clear for everybody else.
make fun of us for that, because that's literally what we do in our
You always
days.
tell me I'm not that pretty.
Yeah, it's good. So what we're doing right now is Margot, raise your hand. She is working very hard with a bunch of great constituents in this room on building one route that we can start looking at money. What we're going to do in the meantime is we're going to build out a connection along the Depot Place Bridge that goes down to the waterfront. It's not going to be perfect. Let me tell you right now, it is not going to be the done deal. But it's going to let people know that you can walk to the waterfront, and then this is not just a place for people to park their cars and access old waterfront transportation uses. There's all sorts of stuff that happens down there. Another thing that we're doing is Bruckner Boulevard. A daunting task, but what we're doing is we're capitalizing on a school that's on the western side of Bruckner Boulevard, and they want some traffic calming. So what we're going to do is we're going to incorporate the Greenway into that, and we're going to put a two-way path along Bruckner Boulevard. That's not the ideal. Yes, we want it over the waterfront, but we're building momentum, just like we did when we built 1st and 2nd Avenue in Manhattan, and laying the groundwork that then we can build off of in the future. And then a couple of outside of the Bronx, the Harlem River Greenway. The Bronx River Alliance shirt, whoever's wearing that threw me off earlier today. All right, so these are various projects that we've been doing that are adding to the network and making it more usable. Sutton Place, maybe some of you haven't seen it. We've all been looking at these large, I love that greenway out there at the UN section. It's wonderful, but people need to know it's there. And more people who see it, more people who access it, more people who think of it as a transportation resource is overall very good for the Greenway Coalition. Waters Place, I have to admit, I have been on the Hutchinson Greenway up here. I have never been to Waters Place. This is kind of in the cuts, but it's very important to make a connection from this part of the Hutchinson Greenway, which is fairly isolated. Yes. And doesn't have the large advocacy group that we see around the Manhattan waterfront, but is still important. Yep. What DOT is doing is we're putting a two-way path, this along the side of a road that is kind of nondescript. It's got some elevated trains over it and such. It's not a great place to be, but we're making that connection, and hopefully people will start to see the Hutchinson Greenway as something more than on the side of the Hutchinson Parkway. And then Utopia Parkway, this is what Mitchell was talking about, really, really cool. And I just want to end with, I think that's the end. Yeah, I want to end with the idea that we are all working together. And when we can do stuff that helps these guys get more money and build a coalition around a project that's bigger than just that project, that's when we succeed. And that, to me, is why I'm here celebrating the Greenway Coalition and trying to make it as strong and as best as possible for New York City. So really exciting, and hope to hear a lot more about new ideas for next year.
All right, if anyone has any questions, you can write them down on the cards and someone will collect them, and I'll read them off. I am going to start off with one while the cards work their way up here. Lena, if you don't mind, if I'm going to go back to this slide that you had here. Oh, yeah. And I was just wondering, because a lot of the projects that are in the pipeline are in one of these stages. They're in planning, they're in design, they're in construction. Yep. It's not always evident to sort of a bystander what stage they're in or what exactly that means. I'm wondering if there's sort of a 45, 60-second explanation as to what each of those three steps mean.
Planning means that we don't have a design team on board yet. As you know, the East River is right where Harlem River Drive and FDR is on the East River. You know, getting to creative solutions like we did for East Midtown and we're designing now for UN Esplanade is a long process that takes planning, permitting work, setting the stage so that when we get it far enough where we can bring on a design team, it can go. It often takes years of that sort of work to get a project in place so that we can use our design and construction experts in New York City to get a project done as soon as possible. That's why they tend to stay in that place for a while. It's because we're getting them ready to go as soon as possible. And then design means just that. We haven't broken ground, but there's a team in place actively working on bringing a project from that planning stage to reality. And then once you're in construction, the design phase typically takes, it depends on the complexity, 2 to 4-ish years, construction about the same amount of time. But that sort of gives you the overall picture of the major stages. There are, of course, 10 different substages within all of those. That gets probably a little bit too detailed for anybody's liking, but that's the general gist.
All right, thank you. So part of the Manhattan Waterfront Greenway plans included addressing the pinch point on the Lower East Side. Is there anything you can speak to for plans around that?
I can speak a little bit to that. It's kind of, I will say, you know what? I'm going to say we're working on it. I don't know exactly what the design is. It has been changing as of late, but I will say that there's a solid amount of money behind it and a very large desire to get it done, despite the fact that that's probably the hardest section in the whole entire city I mean, maybe from my perspective it is, because of the Con Ed plant there, the Sandy issues with the Con Ed plant, that was what knocked out Lower Manhattan during Sandy. There's a whole host of things that need to be done there, and that one's gonna take some time, but I will say that we're working on it, and that we're working on, like, basically what our job is at this point, make sure that's wide enough, or as wide as it possibly can be, so it can accommodate the people walking and riding a bike, because that's gonna see a lot of volume. If you guys don't know what I'm talking about, it's 14th Street between 14th and 12th, I think. Sorry, east side between 14th and 12th. Stuyvesant Cove, south of Stuyvesant Cove, there we go.
Okay. There is a plan to complete the Greenway around Manhattan. The Hudson River Greenway already exists on the west side. There is no Hudson River Greenway in the Bronx. So the building out a Bronx Harlem River Greenway is, it's a step forward to that. Anything you can speak to in terms of a plan that might be coming together for a Hudson River Greenway in the Bronx?
Well, I know that there has been some studies done for this corridor that's basically along the shore of Riverdale there. But there's a lot of active rail traffic there. There's the Amtrak tracks, the Metro North Hudson line, all that's going on. So it's certainly, like all of these gaps that we're talking about, a big infrastructure challenge, but one that people have been looking at, one that us in Parks have been asking a little bit about because we have some properties that are along the shoreline there. But also questions that we've started to be asking to Amtrak. And Metro North, the MTA, what's your plans for making sure that these rail infrastructure pieces here are going to be resilient to rising water in the Hudson? And I think there's a lot of opportunities there to work with these other agencies that are outside of the immediate city family and coming up with plans like we've done along these East River gaps in Manhattan, how to complement pair infrastructure that needs to happen to keep building the city more resilient with these critical pieces of infrastructure, and looking for opportunities to find ways to look at that gap as well. But it takes a lot of coordination outside of just our three teams here, and we're starting those conversations.
A positive is MTA Bridges and Tunnels is looking at upgrading the bike lane on the 9A bridge. I think
Henry
it's
Hudson Parkway.
Hudson. There we go.
Okay. So waterfront greenway redevelopment projects, wonderful, sorely needed. Also, however, during construction, they also have some substandard detours. So example given was South Street during the East Side coastal resiliency work. How can we ensure that walkers and bikers still have low stress in all ages and all abilities connections during this type of construction? And also speak to wayfinding if you can.
Yeah, I think first, the best thing we can do is make the construction of these projects as quick as possible so that we can get people out on beautiful new facilities that are as safe and separated as, those sort of gold standard sort of level of safety that you were talking about. I think this is why redundancy is so important, and why we've been working to not just build those waterfront facilities, but for bikers, build a strong network of bike lanes on streets that are interior to the waterfront, so that we don't have to scramble and try to build out, temporary bike lanes, walkways, et cetera. If we have them already there, it allows us to for people to be able to use them and use them easily and already know what they are and where they are before those big construction projects begin.
We do have standards at New York City DOT. You should always bring them up to us if there's particular issues. I will say it's always a constant battle, though, for those of you who are in the construction industry, for the large amounts of equipment that need to be brought into the city. Same thing happens on roads. It's a bummer when it happens to bikes and peds, because oftentimes that puts them in danger. So please let us know and advocate. If you guys see something that's wrong, please put in a 311 request. We'll get to it in 3 years. Just kidding. No, don't. That was a total joke. 3, 4. All right, 4. No, the point is, no, honestly, it does get elevated really quickly. If it's a safety issue, we have actually people who are out there who will go out and check on it. And that is something we do throughout the city.
Okay. The language of the term greenway is important. It's more than green paint for bike lanes, it's about greenery. How can you ensure equity that communities like the Bronx can have waterfront greenways like the ones in Manhattan?
It's a tough problem because you do see money follow other money, and that is something that happens in Manhattan. That happens in all of our lives, schools, et cetera. So I think it's something we have to talk about. I think it's something that, first of all, it's more than just a question at a conference. It's us holding our elected officials accountable. I think that one of the things that I really believe in is getting a project started and showing that people in these neighborhoods do use their waterfront paths, and it's not just vehicles that need to use Bruckner Boulevard, for example. We need to show the fact that people can walk on these places and that they will change over time. And then we need to stay behind that and keep pushing and keep showing the examples of things like the Manhattan waterfront and keep on bringing it up. It's something that happens with us, but oftentimes we will have these conversations with people. But the more people that speak about it, we can't run from it. More people that speak about it, the more people it helps.
I'm going to ask one more question. We've actually got a few different questions about the Greenway Gap in Inwood, and I think all of these kind of, they almost seem to refer to slightly different portions of the gap. So there's the part that connects the Empire State Trail coming from the Bronx to the West Side Greenway. There's also the part that connects from the Harlem River Manhattan Side Greenway to the Empire State Trail. Anything that you can share about plans to address the gap in Inwood?
I mean, I'll go into, in Inwood, we are looking at a connection down to the waterfront on the west side. We're looking at upgrading the lanes along Dykeman. I'm going to let Lena talk about that.
Yeah, we're actively working on planning the Academy Street and North Cove parks, which will be along the water, and then extending the Greenway along the Sherman Creek waterfront in that area. And I know that that's combined with world-class bike lanes along 10th Avenue to create sort of your slow waterfront option with your faster upland option on 10th Ave. So it's a difficult area, so we're planning multiple solutions at different places.
It's an interesting problem and a good one to have. We have money and we're looking at a lot of different options. The reality is that neighborhood's changing a lot, and it would kind of be helpful, and it shows kind of like some of these smaller projects that we do kind of lay the foundation. We don't really have that there. We're talking about new waterfront parks, bike lanes on 10th Avenue. Like these are tough things to do, so it's a lot of conversations that are going to happen between us, between our supervisors about how to spend that money and in what way. And then you'll start to see a plan probably come to fruition within the next year or so. And then when it gets built out, is further past that.
All right. Let's hear it one more time for Mitchel, Lena, and Ted. Thank you.